All right, this is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3. Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for the good programming, and I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station, and it's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, I'm so glad you got through another week. It is January 17th. It is Friday. Your assignment this weekend is to do something that brings you happiness, that brings you zen, that brings you peace, whatever that may be. And if you're one of the folks who is going to be working this weekend, thank you. We appreciate that and how you support the rest of us who are taking 2 or 3 days off. This Monday is the Martin Luther King holiday. Once in a while, it lines up with Inauguration Day. This is one of those times. I'm going to be here Monday. We are going to be commenting on the inauguration, which you may have heard is not going to be outside. I believe Ronald Reagan also, because of weather, had an inauguration, a swearing in the Capitol Rotunda because of the cold. And that's what's happening this time, too. So all the people who were planning to line up, to stand around, to hear their leader, not going to happen. Stay home, watch it on television. That's what the rest of us are going to do. It is going to take place on the early hours of Monday, so it will be over. He will officially be president by the time I'm on the air Monday at 2. We'll see. In between the time that he is sworn in and the time I take the airwaves, what do you think? What do you, supposedly he's got this stack of executive orders ready and raring to go. And we will be reporting on that. Yes, we will. I'm going to be joined by Chris Bury for part of the show, John Shaw from the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute for part of the show. And we will see. You know, I am reluctant. Not only do I not try to put on Trump or Vance clips, I don't even usually put on too many Republicans. You know, even though there may be something that they've said that's just outrageous, I don't want to amplify it. I don't want to give it any more life. I might tell you about it, but that's it. We'll see what Donald Trump says in his inaugural address. If there's anything that I feel is important enough to break my rule, there might be. There might be. You know, maybe he'll shock us all and talk about this amazing vision for this wonderful country. I know. I know. Chances are that's not what's going to happen. Chances are it'll be, here are my enemies, and I will be going after them. That's pretty much what I expect. But we shall see. However, it is Friday, and you know Friday, we spend the first full half of the show taking your calls. Let's see, I got to pull up the text line here. We will be listening to your calls and reading your texts. 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. There are confirmation hearings continuing. Looks like, you know, Republicans were all like, oh, we're not going to leave town. You know, he wanted the Senate to leave town so he could just appoint all of his cabinet members with recess appointments, which means no confirmation hearings. And the Senate, John Thune was like, no, that's not how we do things. That's my John Thune voice. Which led some people to believe that there was actually going to be some serious conversation, some serious questioning of these folks. I'm still waiting to see that. Now, Kristi Noem, Pete Hegseth, not necessarily particularly qualified folks. Hegseth is outrageously unqualified. You know, maybe there'll be some pushback when it gets to Kash Patel. But so far, the Senate, for all of their, we're going to do things the way we always do them. Yeah. Which apparently what that means, the way they always do things, is rolling over and giving Donald Trump whatever he wants. If Joni Ernst can be pressured into voting Pete Hegseth's nomination out of committee, and apparently she has been, there's no hope. There really isn't. Don't get your hopes up. The cabinet Donald Trump placed in his first administration, we were concerned that some of those people, Rex Tillerson, you know, oil and gas CEO, Rex Tillerson, looks like Nelson Mandela next to some of these clowns. Because Donald Trump has made it clear he doesn't care about experience. He doesn't care about competence. He cares about loyalty. Which is why Pam Bondi, as she's going to be the new Merrick Garland, and Donald Trump tells her to investigate and find some way to bring charges against the people on the January 6th committee in Congress, she's going to do it. They're all going to do it. Their loyalty is to him. I don't care what they say. Their loyalty is to him, not to the American people, not to the Constitution. My fear is that Pam Bondi at DOJ is actually going to make us nostalgic for the days of Bill Barr. And I know, I hated Bill Barr. I still hate Bill Barr. Because he corrupted the DOJ. He made that person is supposed to be America's lawyer. And Bill Barr was Donald Trump's lawyer. All of the cabinet officials that were found to be utterly corrupt and had to quit their jobs and whose situations were recommended for prosecution, yeah, Bill Barr decided, I don't really think we need to prosecute any of these folks, not any of them. Bill Barr only realized that there was trouble in River City when he quit after January 6th. And, you know, he was within days of that administration being over. And now all of a sudden he's like, oh, no, that everything he did was terrible. Yeah, well, why'd you make it so easy for him? Why did you help him at every turn? That's the better question. So I don't think Pam Bondi is going to be any better, and she might be worse. We shall see. We shall see. But, you know, if we're looking for a silver lining here, I think these people are going to be so bad and so corrupt that it is, no matter if you're a Republican who thinks that Democrats are the devil, it's going to make the Democrats look like the much better choice come the midterms. I know that still means we've got 2 years to hunker down and bunker down and do any other kind of protective measures necessary to survive. We will abide. I want to talk about the fires in California. There's more information on that. I want to share with you some of the Joe Biden farewell address that he made to the nation this week. And I want to get to all of that. But first, we are going to start with the phone lines. Our good friend Bobby is on the line from Indiana. Hello, Bobby. How are you today?
Well, this may be my farewell address to you. I'm making a very dramatic turn over the weekend, which might preclude me calling in after this point. I'm not going to hold back on any derogatory terminology in regards to Mr. Donald from here on out. It's any health that I have left, it is destroying it. And so I'm just gonna, if I want to say SOB, I'm going to fill in all the letters, for example. And if it happens that way, it's just going to happen that way. If for any reason I call you and it happens, I hope you got a dump button or something.
Well, Lady B does have a dump button, but what's going on this weekend? Are you having some sort of health issue? Is that why you're, or is it just?
I'm always for that. But I've just had a keister full of this guy and the rest of his clown car, as you love to call it. And with everything I've been hearing that's coming our way, and, you and others keep saying, well, in 2 years, this, that, and the other can happen, and it'll be a different world. Well, I think this cat can destroy me in 2 hours or less. Well, I found this out, so I can tell you, with my big Social Security raise for this year, for 2025, I will earn $11,892. Now, I'm not certain, but I just about be willing to put money down if that's below the poverty level for a single person. And I can live with that. It wouldn't be easy if it weren't for all of the things they're talking about to destroy even that. And that goes for millions of us in those straits. That's not just my horn that's being honked right now. And all the god-awful things that this demon in an ill-fitting suit is going to be throwing at us. And so with that in mind, I'm just not putting up with these people. And
well, I can't blame you. I can't blame you. I think that nobody wants to put up with these people. And I think a lot of us are still mad at the people who voted for this guy, whatever their reason. And you know what? Eggs are going to get more and more expensive regardless of who's in the White House, because we have bird flu, folks.
I don't care.
But I think I hope you can hang on, Bobby. I want you to hang on. If you need to, if you need to put your feet up.
If they would allow me, I'd do it. But I don't think they're going to allow a large portion of us to do that, quite frankly. I'm going to hang out. I'm going to hang out as long as I can. But when I can no longer pay the rent and utilities, I'm hanging up my shield for good. So that's just the way it is. That's the way it is for a lot of it.
It is the way it is for a lot of people, Bobby.
When you're in that, when you get to that age and health-wise, you can only do so much fighting with what you got. And if you don't have it, you can't fight with it.
You sit back and let me do the fighting, okay? You sit back and let me do the fighting, and we'll get to the other side of this. Bobby, I'm late getting to a commercial break. Thank you for calling in, my friend. Please don't lose hope. We are going to take a real quick break, and we're going to be back with more after this.
If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Amazon, or HeartlandSignal.com. Just search for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive. Choose Views with Richard Chew.
Can we fix our democracy? Absolutely. We have to. We have no choice. Has it been a democracy that's had major flaws and holes in it like Swiss cheese? Absolutely. And do our systems fail us? Yes, they do. It starts with this, guys. Trust me when I say this. It starts with acknowledging that we have these issues and we have these problems.
Richard Chew, weekday mornings at 6 on WCPT 820.
Hey, Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
Now back to Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
It is Friday, and for the first half of the show, we take your calls and texts. Let's go to Bolingbrook. Earl is on the line. Hey, Earl, thanks for calling in this Friday.
Hi, Joan. How are you?
Okay, so far.
I wanted to just talk about a couple things if I could. First one was the inauguration. I heard the news that they're moving it indoors, and I just got to say, and this maybe will make people laugh, Barack Obama's inauguration was out in very cold weather. I know I was there, got the opportunity to be at his inauguration, and it was very cold, so chalk one up for President Obama. I feel bad for some of the people that are going to this inauguration that they won't get a chance to see it out there, but it's almost kind of like a karma thing with this president coming in. So that out of the way, I just wanted to talk about the president's cabinet picks. It's just embarrassing, some of the people that he's nominated, and they don't deserve to be in these positions, and shame on these Republicans that have no backbone to say no to these people who are totally unqualified, shouldn't be nominated for these positions, and it just shows you that money can buy anything. Money bought this election, the billionaires bought this election, and now we're paying the price for that. Good governance, throw that right out the window with some of these people. There's no the day of good people that worked for you. That's gone. These people are just so unqualified and so beyond the realm. Like I watched,
and I really did think Hegseth was doomed to defeat. But he did the whole Donald Trump thing, which I think Donald Trump admired. That he was like, you know what? I'm not backing down. I'm not quitting. You're not going to get rid of me that easy. And I think, supposedly Donald Trump didn't make any calls on Hegseth's behalf. Didn't supposedly, at least not in the beginning. Somebody got to Joni Ernst. That's for sure. I don't know who. I don't know who was the one who had enough sway over her. She was the Republican on the committee that was very anti-Hegseth, and it only takes one Republican vote to sink the nomination. But she's caved. She has completely caved.
I was watching some of the Hegseth hearing, and it was embarrassing. Like, the Republicans, they spin a phony tale, and they just gloss over anything that, if you were going for a job, anybody with the track record and you know, the reports on this guy, they would have been told, sorry, no. Or if they were in the job, they would have been fired for this stuff. And this guy's going to head the military, you know, in charge of our Defense Department. And these Republicans just sat there and ignored all the bad stuff. And the Democrats, you know, I know some of it is show, but they were prepared. They had all these things, which a lot of them are fact. These are reported incidents, and people, you know, took the time to make these reports. And the Republicans just dismiss them like it's nothing because they're so worried about losing their seat in Congress and their job that they look past all this. And the rest of us now get to suffer because of it's just, I cannot believe how the Republican Party has fallen down into the bottom of the toilet. It is just embarrassing to watch them fall head over heels for Donald Trump and Donald Trump's minions, and they're more worried about their jobs and their seats than they are about the people.
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly right. If Joni Ernst was willing to walk away from what admittedly is a very cushy job, but if she was willing to walk away, nobody could pressure her into anything. And somebody has pressured her into this. She's a former member of the military. She has been working with other senators to strengthen the protections women have against sexual assault in the military. And this is the guy she's going to put in charge. It's an embarrassment. Anyway, Earl, thank you for the call. We've got to get going. Yeah. Thanks so very much. I want to share some of the texts that we've gotten. And Bobby, if you're still listening, this has happened before. People really want to help you. And I will tell those of you who wish there was something you could do to help out Bobby. When that help was offered before, Bobby was very, very touched, and he told me to tell people to donate to the Salvation Army instead of trying to help him out in any way, shape, or form. So there you have that. Somebody else texted in. They wanted to know why all the former presidents were going to the inauguration. I think that Donald Trump has really politicized, and the Republican Party, they've made everything a political battle. And I believe that by going to the inauguration, the former presidents are trying to remind people of how things could be, should be, used to be, that saying, I hate you because of your party isn't who we used to be. I may disagree with what you want to do or how you want to do it, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to insult you because you belong to a different party. And I think that is what the former presidents are trying to convey. I really do. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with more texts and more calls right after this.
There's no excuse to miss Joan Esposito.
It's number one on my stereo.
Live, local, and progressive. You can listen to her daily at WCPT820.com on your computer or phone.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Want to join the conversation?
I just wanted to thank your station for consistently reporting the facts. In a world of clickbait headlines, your station is who I trust for the real news.
Call Joan now at 773-763-9278 and join the conversation. Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820.
Every Friday, we spend the first half of the show taking your calls and talking about the news of the day. I want to go back to the phone lines and welcome a first-time caller. Patty is on the line from Michigan. Hey, Patty, thanks for calling in today.
Oh, thanks, Joan. I am a longtime listener and really love your show. While I was waiting, I just thought of something funny. You are the Ron Santo of politics, of radio, because I'm a longtime Cubs fan, and every time something bad happened, Ron Santo, and I just love the emotion you show towards the debacle that we're in, and it's wonderful. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
I'm in a very conservative district in Michigan, and our congressman, who I follow, just lies and lies and lies. He sends the newsletters out, and everything he says is a lie. And it just blows my mind. And so tying into that, I just don't understand. Every single person, I would think, in the United States watched January 6th on their television. They didn't need Fox News to tell them what was going on. They didn't need mom or dad. They didn't need grandparents. Everyone witnessed this, and those people voted for this insurrectionist criminal. So, I do a lot of activism, and yes, okay, we've got 2026 coming. But is that really going to make a difference if he screws up? Are people really going to lay down their sword and say, okay, yeah, now I've got to vote for the Democrats? I don't know. I mean, that's my thing.
Well, what I'm hoping, Patty, is that some of the people who voted Republican did so not because they were ardent MAGA supporters, because those people will be with him till the day he dies.
Yeah.
But I think that there were people who, whether because of a lack of information or misinformation or low information, people were just like, you know what? I don't like the way the world is going. I don't think that prices are doing what I want to do. I don't like the rent I'm paying. I don't like the cost of groceries. So I'm going to vote for who's ever not in power. I was talking to a political scientist earlier in the week who said that actually not even just in the United States, but also in several countries worldwide, this time around there was a real anti-incumbent sentiment. I don't care who you are and who's running against you. I'm not happy, so let's give the other guys a shot. And if that's the case and things don't get markedly better, or heaven forbid things get worse, then I think those people will change their votes in the midterms.
Right.
That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, and one last thing, I'll be quick because I know you have a lot of people calling in. I respect what you say about the president's going to the inauguration. However, I'm so pleased with Michelle, and I think there's several others who are not going. But to sit there as a president, a former president, and watch this guy put his hand on the Bible and lie and lie and lie, knowing that he is not taking this oath seriously. I don't know how they can sit there and watch that. I'm not going to watch it. There's absolutely no way I will not watch that. So that's where I am on that. It's a farce. It's just a farce.
I think Michelle is, she's not a president. She's a first lady. And, she worked really hard for Kamala. She does not like Donald Trump in any way, shape, or form. So you know what? Yeah. If I were her, I'd stay home, too. And the one thing that I think is going to be interesting about the inauguration, I felt this way when he won the first time, is I wonder if lightning will strike him the minute he puts his hand on the Bible. I don't know. I think it could happen, Patty. I think it could happen.
Let's hope. Let's pray.
That would be a story. Man, I'd stay on the air for 12 hours to tell that story. Anyway, Patty, thank you so much.
And I love you, and we're going to make it through. That's
yes,
for sure.
We are. Yes, we are.
Yep.
Thank you so much for the call. Appreciate that. Let's go to our good friend Jim, who is on the line. Hello, Jim. Jim?
Hi, Joan. Hi, Joan. I'm ready for the 4 years of the locust coming up. I'm going to wear some kind of a beekeeper suit for 4 years.
A hazmat. But, don't go for a beekeeper. Go full hazmat.
Yeah, I am. There's no question about it. But what's the irony in this is Martin Luther King Day. Trump's father was arrested 100 years ago in the 20s in a Ku Klux Klan outfit in New York. An avowed racist. His son is an avowed racist, a criminal, a sexual deviant. No respect for our. He has no idea what American history is, and yet he's embarking on 4 years. And what's really strange about all this is he pulled off the impossible twice. Beating Clinton was like a 20% chance of winning that election, and this time he should have had no chance. But we were deserted by 15, God knows how many Democrats, with no articulation of why they did it. With all this information, Joan, I have not seen one Democrat come forward and say, well, the reason I wanted to experiment with Project 2025. I want to see how it works.
Yeah.
That's about the only way you could possibly come to that conclusion. That you know that they're the oligarchs are. How about Doge? They're setting up Doge with Ramaswamy and this lunatic from South Africa.
Well, I don't know how much longer Vivek Ramaswamy is going to be part of that, because he has decided that he wants to be. He wants to run for office in Ohio. I think he wants. Trump said he should go after J.D. Vance's seat. I'm not sure if that's the race he's decided to run in. I'm going to check that. But he's definitely going to be running. Yeah, that's what I thought. Donald Trump wanted Vivek Ramaswamy to try to get J.D. Vance's Senate seat, but he has decided instead that he wants to run for governor in Ohio. So there. So I guess he's not going to be doging too much.
That's par for the course. That's par for the course. But what happened to the Constitution? And I recall the Constitution I studied, the idea was to put representatives in from your village or whatever the case may be to elaborate on your problems in that particular area. Now these people are being bought and sold like cattle, and not only that, Joe, but think of this. The world is turned to the world in pictures. It's no longer an intellectual pursuit. It's what people see on TikTok and what they see in pictures. We're ruled by what we see in pictures. Trump was all over TikTok. Now, what decision he's going to make on TikTok is another story, but he certainly got favorable publicity from the Chinese and whoever else was involved in it. There's pictures of the red hats, and Trump is a good guy, and not absolute nonsense. Not mentioning how many people he raped and molested, how he tried to.
Well, maybe they're trying to head off those tariffs. Nobody, except for Donald Trump, nobody really wants those tariffs. I don't know, Jim. I don't know.
I don't care. We're in for just a tick. We're in for God knows what. And anyway, but think of the speculation on Ukraine and how he's got the president of Ukraine on tenterhooks. What's he going to offer to Putin, and what is Putin going to take, and et cetera, et cetera. Then he's got these maniacs going to the Middle East, Huckabee, a crazy person, and another person. Like, what kind of a deal are you going to get out of that? What deal is the Palestinians going to get out of that?
I believe he's the one who says there is no such thing as a Palestinian.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no such thing as a Palestinian. So I can't imagine, if you don't believe that there actually are Palestinians, that you support a Palestinian state. Doesn't seem like that.
Anyway, Joan, as Roosevelt was saying in closing, I'll say that I'm glad it's in the morning, because I hope I'm unconscious from a smoking something, so I wake up at 12 and hear your station at 2. And anyway, have a good weekend, Joe. Thank you much.
Jim. Thank you so much. We are going to get to more callers, but first we're going to take a break. We'll be back right after this.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820.
WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
Attention, everyone.
Don't turn that dial. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
It is Friday. We are taking your calls and talking about the news of the day. I'm going to go real quick. I do want to share with you some of Biden's farewell address and also some stuff about the L.A. fires. But Bobby called back. Bobby from Indiana called back and told Lady B wants to say a couple of things that people can do for him. Lady B, let's get Bobby back on the line. Hey, Bobby, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Joan, and I got to thank you and your listeners that want to help me directly. There are two things they can do that would delight me. One is to call all of their representatives, whether Democratic or Republican, whoever they may be up and down the line, that can help to protect our Social Security.
Oh, man. Amen to that, Bobby. I'm with you right there.
Yeah. And number two, this is also not just for me, but for many, many, some kind of controls put on rents for elderly, disabled, and ill people who are on very fixed incomes, where we're not being outstripped. Every year we get a cost of living, and we get rent increases that are sometimes double that. It's killing us.
Okay, Bobby. Thank you for calling back, and those are two very, very, very good ideas, and I appreciate you, and I hope we get those things in place, and that you no longer have anything to worry about going forward. And thanks again, Bobby, for calling back.
Have a good weekend, Joni. Have a good weekend.
You too. Before we go to break, I want to play with you. Sure, let's play together. What the heck? I also want to play for you part of what Joe Biden said. You know, he talked about his accomplishments, but mostly he worried about the future and the danger of basically a few really, really rich people making all the decisions and be in charge. But he did talk about, briefly, the things that he's done. And I think it is worth remembering this. It is worth mentioning this again. So I'm going to play this part where President Biden talked about the last 4 years and his accomplishments. Listen to this.
In the past 4 years, our democracy has held strong. And every day I've kept my commitment to be president for all Americans through one of the toughest periods in our nation's history. I've had a great partner in Vice President Kamala Harris. It's been the honor of my life to see the resilience of essential workers getting us through a once-in-a-century pandemic, the heroism of service members and first responders keeping us safe, the determination of advocates standing up for our rights and our freedoms instead of losing their jobs to an economic crisis that we inherited. Millions of Americans now have the dignity of work. Millions of entrepreneurs and companies creating new businesses and industries, hiring American workers, using American products. And together, we've launched a new era of American possibilities. One of the greatest modernizations of infrastructure in our entire history, from new roads, bridges, clean water, affordable high-speed internet for every American. We invented the semiconductor, smaller than the tip of my little finger, and now is bringing those chip factories and those jobs back to America where they belong, creating thousands of jobs. Finally, giving Medicare the power to negotiate lower prescription drug prices for millions of seniors. And finally, doing something to protect our children and our families by passing the most significant gun safety law in 30 years and bringing violent crime to a 50-year low, meeting our sacred obligation to over 1 million veterans so far who are exposed to toxic materials, and to their families, providing medical care and education benefits and more for their families. You know, it will take time to feel the full impact of all we've done together. But the seeds are planted, and they'll grow and they'll bloom for decades to come. At home, we've created nearly 17 million new jobs, more than any other single administration in a single term. More people have health care than ever before. And overseas, we've strengthened NATO. Ukraine is still free. And we've pulled ahead of our competition with China. And so much more. I'm so proud of how much we've accomplished together for the American people. And I wish the incoming administration success, because I want America to succeed. That's why I've held my duty to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition of power, to ensure we lead by the power of our example.
That was part of Joe Biden's farewell address earlier this week. I'm going to continue to share that going forward in this first half of the show today. Before we go back to the phone lines, though, there's one other thing that I want to share with you that is not Biden or LA fires related. Anthony Scaramucci was recently interviewed by an ABC reporter. Remember, Anthony Scaramucci was made the White House communications director under Trump. And I can't remember if he lasted 11 days, 12 days, 14 days. It was brief. And since he has gone through that experience, he has become very clear-eyed about Donald Trump. He was talking to this ABC reporter. She asked him a kind of a silly question about Trump, but he took that answer and made it, frankly, better than the question. It was a bigger answer about political bravery and political cowardice and this whole hyper-masculinity cult that seems to surround Trump, that Scaramucci believes, at least as far as Trump goes, is deeply rooted in insecurity. I just thought that this was, like I say, it starts off a little silly, but then I think he goes on to make some good points. So I want you to listen to this. As an ABC reporter asking Anthony Scaramucci about Trump. Listen to this.
Does Trump really wear a girdle?
On certain days, yes. Mm-hmm.
What's that about?
Yeah. He's an image-oriented guy. He's a television entertainer. He hates taking pictures of him from the side because he just looks too fat from the side. He likes to take pictures head on. Spends a lot of time on his hair. It's like a sort of a weave thing that he does up there. He's got a certain orange war paint that he wears. He's got 2-inch heels, lifts in his shoes, even though he's a reasonably tall person. There's insecurity there. There's the hyper-masculinity is a tell for how insecure the guy actually is. And so what I don't understand, and I think people will write about 50 years from now, is that we just had a group of political cowards that couldn't stand up to the guy. I don't understand. What were they fearful of? And maybe it just was they want to stay in power more than they want to serve the public. Maybe that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting? The political cowardice of being afraid to stand up to a guy who is deeply, deeply, deeply insecure. Interesting, huh? Let's go back to the phone lines. Mike is on the line from the south suburbs. Hi, Mike. Thanks for the call today.
Hey, Joan. I think that last from Mr. Scaramucci, I think that just threw me off of my comment that I was going to make. That is scary to think that people, view the world through that prism, and people like Johnny Ernstwood then bow down to this guy.
Yeah.
And what are they going to say 20 years later when what we thought would happen happens? How are they going to, go back and then, reconcile what they did at that time? That's powerful. That's scary. But if I can kind of segue in terms of what I was calling about, I've called you for your show before about the Trump tax cuts that are set to expire, and what those tax cuts did to people in blue states who had their ability to write off their mortgage interest and the property taxes, just wiped out in order to benefit red states. There are a lot of Republicans, and I don't know if you've read this, there are a lot of Republicans in blue states who have told the administration that they may not go along with the renewal of those tax cuts unless these exemptions and those deductions for mortgage interest and property taxes are reinstated. And I haven't heard anything from our representatives. I've written, Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth and, my representative Robin Kelly about, have they started focusing on this? Because that made a big impact on our community here in Illinois, where, before that tax cut, people might have been getting a modest refund back. And now, and there's always that lag effect between when, economic policy and tax policy is implemented and when you see the effects of it. And now they're writing these large checks to the IRS because those exemptions are gone. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you've seen that, come up, but there are a lot of Republicans in blue states in Maryland and New York and Delaware and in California who are telling the administration that they're pushing that tax cut comes up, that they can't support it unless these exemptions are reinstated. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have not seen that. And for those of you who are remembering Trump's first term, he got people to get their representatives to support a massive tax cut for the very wealthy. And part of the way that he got that support was the very first year there was also a tax cut for the middle class. However, the tax cut for the middle class didn't last, and the tax cut for the ultra wealthy did last. It does have an expiration date, and that's one of the things that Trump definitely wants to get done. Watch. That will be one of the things he works on right out of the gate. Everybody's like, he's going to go mass deportations. He might, no. But the tax cuts, that's where he knows that all the people who wrote him big checks, that's what they're waiting for, and he better come through.
And what's so ironic about that, Joan, is that the architect of that, was Peter Oskin. He's a congressman from Illinois.
Yeah,
he was the architect of that. And in his district, where property taxes and that are probably some of the highest in the nation, he did more harm to them than anybody could have ever done. So
it's the gift that keeps on giving, isn't it, Mike?
Yep, exactly. But that was really that's troubling. For him to have that assessment, somebody who's been in those rooms and understands that and sees that on a day-to-day, and he makes that comment, I have to take that to heart that what he's saying is exactly the case.
Mike, thank you so much for the call. We have got to take a break for news here. We are going to come back after the news, and we are going to continue to take your calls. I'm going to share a little bit more of Joe Biden's farewell address and an update on some people learning more and more about the cause of the fires in L.A. and also why some houses seemed to just explode. It's really interesting stuff. We'll get to all that after the news.
Remember when you get to work to hop over to WCPT820.com or the TuneIn Radio app and stream The Stephanie Miller Show. Weekdays 8 to 11 a.m. on Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. This is WCPT 820. where facts matter.
Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
It is Friday, and every Friday we spend the first half of the show talking to you, reading your texts, taking your calls. I appreciate all the kind words that are coming my way via text today. Thank you for that. And we are talking also about the news of the day. So before we get to 3:30, where we're going to wrap this part of the show up, I want to share just a little bit more of what President Biden said in his farewell address. And I'm going to share some sound from the L.A. fires. But for right now, let's go back to the phone line. Ron is on the line from Chicago. Hey, Ron, how are you?
Pretty good. On Monday, Carrie Underwood is going to be singing the national anthem at the inauguration. Wasn't Roseanne Barr available to sing?
Oh, yeah. Like when Roseanne Barr did the national anthem at the baseball park that one time. And she said she meant it as a joke, but when she finished, she grabbed her crotch. And that was supposed to be like a baseball joke. It wasn't very funny.
No. And did you mention that the festivities on Monday are going to be held indoors?
Yes.
Yeah, well, he did mention that, because...
Though some people, Ron, on the text line, I will say that the speculation as to why it's being moved indoors is quite humorous. Things to do with, the fact that when he puts his hand on the Bible, he might spontaneously combust, and there's the very creative, you texters, very, very creative in your explanations for why this has been moved indoors, though it's going to be it's going to be cold in Washington, and it is going to be much, much, much colder here. Chicago on Monday the 20th, which is also Martin Luther King holiday. There's another reason why there might be lightning involved in this inauguration. But the high in Chicago is going to be 9 degrees. 9. That's the high temperature. The high temperature.
Right. I think that they are worried since Trump wears so much heavy makeup that they're worried in the cold weather his makeup will start coming off.
Or what if it freezes and then he can't talk? His whole face could be frozen in one position.
Right. There's supposed to be a drizzle, too. So.
Oh, goodness. Yes, that's some of the other texters have speculated that he doesn't want his hair to be mussed up in the bad weather. I don't know. There's I just hope we can keep this sense of humor for a little while longer. When he starts doing some of the terrible things that he has said he wants to do, I hope we can still find something that puts a smile on our face in those days.
Right. And Trump was on a talk radio show this morning, and he was saying that on Monday he's going to tell us all the wonderful things he's going to be doing, like raising the national debt $4 trillion, getting us out of NATO, getting rid of the WOK, the WOK, and people who are educated and informed, they are the enemy. They are his enemy.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting speech. I mean, his first inauguration speech was just so angry and full of grievance. I don't think this guy is capable of being hopeful or optimistic. So I have very, very, very low expectations for it.
Yeah, I just wondering is he going to say Monday, fight, fight, fight? I just wonder if he's going to say that. That's what I'm looking for.
We should, too bad it's already Friday. I was going to say we should put together a bingo card of things that he's likely to say. I don't know what happens if you win bingo, but it would have been amusing. Anyway, Ron, thank you so much for the call. Appreciate that. Andrew is on the line from Detroit. Hello, Andrew. Thanks for calling in today.
Thank you for taking my call. I'm going to start off with kind of a joke. I think the reason it's going to be indoors is crowd size. He is terrified that the crowd size.
I think, honestly, when they said to him, Mr. Trump, it's going to be a little on the chilly side. In Washington, it's going to be in the 20s, which, as you know, for our area, that's practically bathing suit weather. But I believe you're right. I think he's very worried that it will be a very low turnout, and he will have to account for that.
I have no intention of watching the thing, but afterwards, and I'm not going to listen to the speech or anything, but I do want to see pictures of such. What are the crowd sizes? What was this? Right with the people while he's being sworn in, who's there and who's not there? That's going to be hilarious, I think.
Well,
anyway,
I will try to do some of that terrible work so you don't have to, Andrew. I will try to do it on your behalf.
I'm calling in today about the gentleman, the first caller, and him being terrified of what's happening. I'm right there with him. I'm on Social Security, 64, so I'm not 65 years old yet. I'm 64, and last year, my landlord asked for a $200 increase in my rent.
Monthly or yearly?
What's that?
Monthly?
Monthly.
Oh.
And I said, you've got all my financials. Where in the hell do you think I'm going to get $200? I said, you saw my increase was $48 from Social Security. I said, I don't have to. We finally settled on $20. Can you imagine? We took it from $200 to $20. They knew they were imbeciles to begin with.
Wow.
So again, this year, after all these price increases, the government knew. The government knew that people like myself on Social Security, and the prices are going up. We had to use our credit cards to survive. And they gave us a lower increase after that than the year before. I just don't know how they expect us to survive.
Yeah.
And then with our insurance companies, and I do use one of the companies instead of Medicare. I use Medicare Advantage. And I know there's a lot of people down about that, but I find it here, in Michigan, right in the Detroit area, because we have some of the most superlative doctors, that I don't have to worry about finding doctors and getting good care. So Medicare Advantage works for me. But still, over the years, they dropped this, they dropped that, they dropped it. And this year, the drop really hurt me. Before December 31st, I had a fall device. I've fallen and I can't get up, one of those buttons. I had one of those. That ended December 31st. So now I do not have a fall device. I live in a two-story home and also the basement. So there's two staircases that I have to navigate. And I'm terrified.
My God.
I've got neuropathy, nerve damage in my feet. I have arthritis in my hips.
And just remember, the Republicans have already said, since Donald Trump's election, that along with Elon Musk wanting to cut trillions out of the government, that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, they are looking at cuts. They're looking at cuts. And Andrew, I hope that common sense takes over. I hope that this doesn't happen, but we are going to have to be paying attention. We are going to have to be on top of our game and making sure that this doesn't happen. Andrew, I thank you for the call. I got to get to a break. We are going to take more calls and hear some stuff after this.
You know that you can listen to Chicago's Progressive Talk on WCPT AM 820. Stream us live at WCPT820.com and on the TuneIn Radio app. Or you can ask Alexa, Siri, or Google to play WCPT from TuneIn. But now you have another option. We're simulcasting our programming overnights, 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. on WSBC AM 1240 for a clearer reception in and around the city. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. And now overnights on WSBC 1240 AM, where facts matter.
You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
Earlier in the week, there was some speculation that I reported that the cause of the Palisades fire in Los Angeles may have been a reignition. There was a hilltop fire after New Year's Eve caused by fireworks. Firefighters went up there, they put it out. But that is almost exactly the same place that the Pacific Palisades fire began. There was a reporter. Remember I told you, I know that there's a phenomenon called reignition. One of the people I know who lost their house went back days later and the house had caught fire again. There is this phenomenon that especially in rough terrain, a fire that is put out can restart. And I told you that while it seems to be a scientific fact, I personally didn't understand it. Well, there was a reporter from the San Francisco Chronicle who posted a video about where the fire likely started. Somebody contacted him and said, I took a picture of the fire when the fireworks set off the fire that was put out, and the place where 6 days later it's believed the Pacific Palisades fire might have started. And he sent the reporter the two photographs, and they are clearly almost exactly the same exact spot. So it does appear this was a reignition. And apparently, even if you wet the ground, the fire can go underground and smolder in the roots of plants. And then days later, even 6 days later, that can erupt again. Anyway, I wanted to share this with you because I thought this was the most interesting explanation of events that I've seen so far. Again, this is a reporter from the San Francisco Chronicle who is talking about the start of the fire. Listen to this.
So the photos were from a longtime resident there named Don Griffin. He took these photos from the exact same vantage point, his backyard. And he told me the big Palisades fire started right in the same spot as one on New Year's. And I thought he meant New Year's a year ago. And he said, no, just a few days ago. So he whipped his phone out and he showed me both photos, and you can clearly see in the terrain the similar features, and it was almost overlapping the two fires. Once we looked into the first fire, it was surrounded by reports and 911 calls of fireworks. January 1st to January 7th is 6 days. I'm not a fire expert. For me, that felt like a long time for a fire to be smoldering, especially since firefighters spent a good portion of the day there wetting it down. That being said, when I spoke to the experts, they said absolutely not. 6 days is nothing. In those conditions where it's super dry, dead vegetation, the soil is crusted so hard that water has trouble penetrating it, the fire goes into the roots of this dead vegetation and smolders as low as a foot below the surface. So to fully get that fire cold is incredibly difficult, especially on steep terrain like that. And they said it was incredibly plausible that it could start even 6 days later.
Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that fascinating? And there was another clip by a retired L.A. County fire captain who explained what happens with these houses. Apparently, when all these embers are flying in the wind, you know, most houses have ventilation. If you have an attic, you have some sort of a vent. Or sometimes if your house is gabled, there will be vents at the top of the house in the gables. Well, the coverings on those vents are meant to keep out animals, so the holes are kind of big. And he said the one simple thing that homeowners can do is replace that screening with the kind of screening that you use in your windows with much tinier holes. Because he said what they've seen with these embers blowing, the embers go into the vents, into the attics, and the houses catch fire from the inside out. This retired fire captain from L.A. County said, when you've got an attic fire, it takes at least 10 firefighters to fight that kind of a fire. And he said, and when you've got 5 firefighters that are trying to keep an eye on all the houses in a cul-de-sac, he said, one house goes up like that. He said, you don't even bother to try to save it. You try to save the houses on either side of it. So I thought that was really fascinating because apparently that's why all these embers aren't like just, you know, burning up the roofs, though certainly at a certain point that's part of it, but they're going in the vents and they're lighting the houses on fire from the inside. It's just amazing. One more thing that I want to share with you before we wrap up our fire discussion for the week. I've been playing you all of these clips of people either seeing the destruction for the first time, people trying to escape the destruction. Listening to those first-person accounts really brings this story home, much more so than me giving you scientific facts or how many square miles have burned. This video was posted by a woman. She and her husband and their 2 kids inherited a small homestead where they were living, and it was them. They have 2 special needs kids, and they have a very small herd of sheep. They couldn't find the sheep when all this started happening, when they had to evacuate. So they obviously packed up their kids and what their kids needed, and they left. When they returned to their property, they found that somehow their sheep had survived. This audio, I just thought was really, really moving, and really, again, these kinds of personal records bring this disaster home in a way that interviews with Gavin Newsom are great and necessary, but you want to really understand what people are living through and have lived through. This is the audio that does that. This woman's name is Vanessa, and like I said, she and her husband returned to. They expected the worst, and they found their sheep still alive. Listen to this.
Everything is gone. But my sheep are alive. Hi, baby. Hi, Choco. I can't believe you survived. Thank you, God. Thank you. Hi, babies. I'm sorry I couldn't get you out. I'm so sorry, but you made it. Hi, honey. Hi, baby. The firemen have been feeding you. How did you guys survive? Thank you, God. Thank you, God. I'll come tomorrow and get you guys out of here, okay? I'm so sorry I couldn't find you. Hi, Big Earl. Hi, baby. You're a warrior. You guys are warriors. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. Hi, baby. I'm so happy. Thank you, God. Come here. Look here.
There are a number of places that you can donate to. Jose Andres, the man behind World Central Kitchen, whenever there's a disaster, he shows up and helps cook for people. That's one of the many places that if you want to support these folks, you can donate to World Central Kitchen. They are feeding people, feeding those who've lost everything. They are feeding the volunteers. They are feeding the first responders. And they go where people need them, and they do great work. You know, I subscribe to The Onion, especially, you know, since they moved into the Chicago area. And even though their emails are silly and their newsletter is even sillier, they posted, apparently, you know, I'm actually a member for them. I gave Ray a gift membership, so he gets the newspaper. And it said that they have more members in the Los Angeles area than in any other part of the country, though, so that, you know, they really, despite the fact that they're usually funny and silly, they wanted to take a moment to mention places where people can donate. And World Central Kitchen was at the top of their list of places to donate, people who are doing good work right now in Los Angeles. They also mentioned that they are now based in Chicago. Chicago, a town that once burned to the ground and rebuilt extremely successfully. And they said, you know, we've already done this once. We've rebuilt a massive urban area. We can do it again. And they ended that post, the very onion-like post, by saying, you know, if you're reading this and you're in L.A., take care of yourself. If you're reading this and you know anybody who lives or works or goes to college out in L.A., please do whatever you can to take care of them. World Central Kitchen is always a good place to donate. I mean, there are obviously animal shelters right now are doing yeoman's work out there, trying to move their regular animals out so they can take in the hundreds of animals that are being found post-fire. So whatever organization is near and dear to your heart, they're probably out in L.A. doing good work right now, and they need your support. We are going to take a break. We're going to get back to politics right after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined now by Jeet Heer, who is the national affairs correspondent and columnist for The Nation magazine, also the host of its weekly podcast, The Time of Monsters with Jeet Heer. And if there was ever a great name for a podcast, Jeet, you were the lucky one who got it. Welcome to our show.
Great to be on. Yeah, you know, it's a very great phrase. It's from the Italian writer Antonio Gramsci. The old world is dying. The new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters, which is, I think, exactly where we are.
Yes. Sadly, we are definitely there. Any predictions for what we're going to hear that's going to inspire us from the inaugural address on Monday?
Well, I'm thinking back to 8 years ago, where Trump's first inauguration, and that was the American Carnage speech, and it was just about how the country is going to hell in a handbasket and everything is terrible. And I believe that George W. Bush, I don't know if on public radio I can say this, but he used a little swear word. He said that was some weird S. So I think we can expect some more weird S.
Oh, I think you're right. I think it's going to be very weird. Shifting gears just a hair, you wrote an article about Justin Trudeau, and my take on Justin Trudeau, I was very disappointed with the way he seemingly shook in his boots and crumbled in the face of the big bully in America, Donald Trump. And several other people in the Canadian government have since redeemed. One of the members of one of the high-ranking members in the government came out and said what Trudeau should have said. Trump wants to push us around. Let him just try. And then my favorite was the woman who recorded a video saying, no, we really don't want to be the 51st state, but if Washington, Oregon, and California want to join Canada, they could be our next province. And then she went on to list all the things like free health care that would benefit them if they, and she even had a name for it. She was going to call them Acadia. So tell the audience what you wrote about Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, no. I mean, I was exactly as you disappointed. I think, in part, I think it's a measure of the type of politician Trudeau is, that he kind of came on board in 2015, sort of Barack Obama time, and was this kind of, he had the slogan "sunny ways," like, we're going to be optimistic. And I think against a bully like Trump, you have to be a little bit tougher. You have to not back down, and you can't just go down to Mar-a-Lago and think you'll smile and get him to change his mind. I think someone like Trump, I think he respects you more if you stand up to him. And I mean, the point of comparison is with Mexico, with President Sheinbaum. Basically, after Trump saying let's change Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America, she took out all these old 18th century maps where California and Texas are Mexicana. So I think, I think standing up to it. I mean, the main thing is at Terra 4, I think Trump thinks it's going to be an easy victory because people will just cave. But I mean, traditionally, it's a two-way street, and Americans both buy and sell things into other countries. And in the case of Canada, American and so-called energy independence comes from Canadian oil. So if the Canadian government can get their act together, they can put up a pretty strong united front. I think Trudeau was weak for other reasons. He has been unpopular. I think, like Joe Biden, he might have stayed around a bit too long. And I think that Liberals are going to get a new leader very shortly. They're having a leadership race, and I think that with a new leader, they'll actually be in a very good position, both to negotiate with Trump and actually, I think, to do very well in the next election.
My favorite so far, I think, has been the president of Honduras. When Donald Trump announced these mass deportations, she said something to the effect of, you want to bring all these Hondurans back to our country who went to your country? Well, you know what? There's a military base that you guys have had for years, and maybe, just maybe, you should leave that military base. It's a military base you've had for a long time. You don't pay any rent for it. You send back plane loads of Hondurans, the military is going to be asked to vacate that military base. I mean, that's, to me, how you handle Trump.
Yeah, no, exactly. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I actually think I was going to be interesting because I think one thing with Trump is it's a classic bully thing. Like, he goes after people he thinks are weak, and then that's why I think he wants some big wins in foreign policy, and he thinks that going against allies is actually going to be, like, the way to get it. So, going against Mexico, Canada, the two biggest trading partners, going against the European countries. And I hope, more people internationally understand that, like, standing up to him is the way to go. I mean, I know it's like with the, taking over Greenland, that, like, Macron in France issued a strong statement against that.
One of our NATO allies, by the way. That's, to me, the best part of that.
I mean, I think the deeper issue is like how Trump conceives foreign policy and conceives these alliances. I think Trump basically has a mafia model of the world, and he sees something like NATO or AUKUS or NORAD as essentially protection rackets.
Yep.
Like the U.S. So it's like so it's basically and like J.D. Vance went to Europe and told them you want to play nice with us, you got to let Elon Musk do what he wants on Twitter. You can't regulate Elon Musk. He's a friend of the administration. So they're basically saying like it's a nice little military alliance you got here. It'd be a shame if anything happened to it, and then my friend Vladimir could really rough you up. So I think that so it's going to be a real challenge. But I also think, like, in a lot of ways, like with a lot of bullies, it's usually if you analyze it, it's a sign of weakness, not strength, right? I just think, like, picking on Canada, it seems like like that's not what a superpower does, right? Like, it just seems totally
I
ridiculous.
had a sound clip from an interview earlier today that Anthony Scaramucci did with an ABC News reporter, and he said all this, hyper masculinity is all based in deep insecurity. He believes that Donald Trump is a deeply, deeply insecure man.
Yeah. And I think Vance the same way. I mean, actually, if you read Vance's book, there's a lot of signs of that. It is. I think for one is doing a sort of macro analysis. It's kind of like so-called crisis of masculinity. Is just like it's no longer you could just be a guy, have a penis, and then like the world is yours, right? You have to like work for a living and compete with the girls and like prove yourself. And it is a sort of so this fantasy thing that Trump is telling his supporters is fantasy of like a return, and it is exactly feeding off of insecurity and weakness. I mean, like before the election, Trump went on all these kind of like masculinity podcasts, and I mean, smart politics. That's where the voters were, but. Like if you actually listen to what the podcasts are, they're all about, like how to pick up girls, right? Like how to do bodybuilding. It's all feeding off of a generation of men who feel like their natural position in society has been upturned.
Make white men great again. That should have been the slogan on the cap. We need to take a break. When we come back, there's a couple episodes of the podcast that I'd really like you to do a deep dive into. One of the December 1st, fact-checking won't save democracy, and the one you did the end of November, don't believe the election myths. I just think that what you covered in those is so interesting. So when we come back from this break, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about those. I'm talking with Jeet Heer, the national affairs correspondent and columnist for The Nation magazine and host of its weekly podcast, The Time of Monsters with Jeet Heer. We'll be right back after this.
Podcasts of Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, are available on Spotify.
We got a Hochberg again today and the two contests. So should we do one right now?
And Amazon. Just search for Joan Esposito.
Hey, progressives, this is Richard Chu, host of Chu's Views here on WCPT AM 820, 6 to 8 a.m. Monday through Friday. We have some real challenges in front of us as a country. Since the beginning of this show, I have always felt compelled to bring you the best that I've got. Now, there's always a why to doing whatever we do. So, as we go forward and face these challenges, know this: you listeners are my why, because I want to make sure I do everything I can to provide a safe, open, forward-moving space that allows you to call, email, text, or just listen to a guy that wants to help you bring out your own championship qualities to truly make this place better for us all. Lofty goal, idealistic, maybe so. But that's my why, and I look forward to bringing you the best that I've got. This is Richard Chu. Stay tuned.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I'm joined by Jeet Heer, who is the national affairs correspondent and a columnist for The Nation magazine, and also the host of its weekly podcast. It's called The Time of Monsters with Jeet Heer. In the beginning of December, he did an episode that was basically a talk that he had given at a university, and the title is Fact-Checking Won't Save Democracy. Jeet, why not? Why not?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think fact-checking is good and necessary, especially like newspapers and publications. But, if you, I think a lot of liberals, going back to when Trump first ran, basically were pointing out, well, this guy lies all the time. Let's get fact-checkers in the media, to go after him. And I think that this kind of misunderstands an important dynamic, which is that the real divide in America right now is not just left and right, it's pro-system and anti-system. And I think that one thing Trump has been able to do is to really consolidate the anti-system vote. And these are the people who don't trust institutions, who, don't listen to doctors when they say, get your vaccination, who, think they're the teachers in the schools are up to no good, who think, and these people get a different stream of information than the fact-check media. And so if you look at the last election, the people who, read newspapers, they overwhelmingly went for Harris, she actually improved over what Biden did, from 4 years ago among the, people who read the fact-check media. The problem is that there's a vast swath of the population that are, listening to Joe Rogan, that are listening, and within that ecosystem of the sort of anti-system politics. And then I would to emphasize something for your listeners. I mean, many of these things are conservative right-leaning, but there's also anti-system left-wing podcasts as well. And in that ecosystem, it's not fact-checking that's important. It's sort of like voice and trust. It's like who seems to be making sense. And I think that the Democrats really, I think it's notable. Trump went on Joe Rogan, and there's a left-wing podcaster, Hassan Piker, and he was at the DNC, and they basically kicked him out because he was talking about how they weren't letting Gaza protesters speak, and they weren't letting trans people speak. So I think that relying on fact checkers doesn't actually win you elections, when the real issue is how do you reach all those people who are mad at the system, who might vote for Trump but might actually be also open to a progressive vision that tries to change the system. And just thinking that fact checking is going to solve your problems, I think it's a delusion.
Jeet, I think you're 100% right on that, and I think it is. We've talked about this on this show a lot, people, even though Democrats work really hard for working Americans, many people have this idea that Democrats are elitists. They look down on people.
Yeah.
And it's not helped by some of the ways that Democrats talk about things.
Well, yeah, and even like the idea of like fact checkers, you're sort of starting to say, well, they're these gatekeepers who have the information, who can decide, right? And it's a kind of teacher's pet politics. It's like and I think there's a lot of people who are instinctively not attracted to that, and they're not. Many of these people end up on the right, but not necessarily. I think some of those people are also angry at corporations, are angry at the insurance companies. I think you can reach them, but you have to reach them in a way that does not talk down to them. I think the fact-checking model kind of talks down to people.
Gee, this is a little bit tiny off topic. Can you explain to me why Joe Rogan is so popular? I don't listen to his podcast on a regular basis, but the times when I've been aware of him is when there's been controversy, like, Aaron Rodgers and all that COVID misinformation. And then what really bothered me was Joe Rogan's response to all that was, oh gosh, that's misinformation. Oh, I didn't know. If only I'd known. Yeah. And I thought to myself, you're an idiot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay. First of all, the thing is, like, Rogan is sort of coming out of, the world of mixed martial arts and Fear Factor, and the people who listen to him were attracted to his kind of like message of like health, right? Like eat these foods, do these exercises, and I think he does a kind of performative ignorance, like as an interviewer, which a lot of people find relatable because they know it's not like the sort of CNN news anchor who knows like things and will like grill somebody based on an assumption of kind of shared knowledge. Well, like Rogan really goes into these interviews like, I don't know what the hell's going on, just asking very basic questions, right? And I think for a lot of people who are like, as I said, anti-system people who don't like to be talked down to by the teacher, like that's very appealing. And I think if you can disentangle, I think Rogan is now basically a pernicious figure because he's encouraging a lot of COVID denial and vaccine skepticism. But I think that basic model of don't talk down to people and be asking questions that an ordinary person could ask, you could do that and actually do that in the service of truth, right? Like if you're more, if you have a little bit more of a conscience than Joe Rogan has. So I think but the appeal is basically he does this kind of performative ignorance, which a lot of people find relatable.
Because they feel confident that they're smarter than him, or they feel confident that he's not smarter and won't lord it over them?
He's asking the kind of questions that they would ask. Like very basic kind of questions, and oh wow, that's cool. Let me Google that, and let me it's the presentation. The presentation is I'm going into this and I don't actually necessarily know the answer, and I will ask these kind of very basic questions, like I said, he does it in a way that is ultimately pernicious, but I actually think, in that sort of podcast world, like having that kind of very relatable voice that shares in the audience, that replicates the experience of learning about something by asking questions. I think that's actually very valuable. And I think the other people that do it in a very helpful way that actually leads people to good places.
I want to talk about your other episode that you posted the end of November. Don't believe the election myths. And you were talking about obviously in the wake of an election, everybody wants to do a big postmortem. Why did we win? Why did we lose? Especially with Democrats, why did we lose? And what you were saying is that some of the lessons that Democrats might think they have learned might not be the right lessons. Explain, please.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to this whole issue of pro-system, anti-system thing. Like, I think a lot of them are looking at these polls, say, well, people thought that, like, Kamala Harris was too left-wing or too wrong on this issue or that issue. But, like, if you actually, like, drill down on, like, who didn't show up, like, there was basically, I mean, you know, it's going to take a while to figure out, like, all the exact numbers. But I think somewhere between 10 and 15 million people who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 basically didn't show up. And the Democrats made some of that up with new voters, but not enough. Like, if you have that many voters not showing up. And I think that the voters that didn't show up, like, a lot of it is just, like, alienation from the Democratic Party a message in terms of, you know, like, talking down to people, but also, like, presenting themselves as we're the ones who represent this system that just, it needs a few reforms, but it's working. And I think that if you understand that that's the dynamic at work, then, like, a lot of the behavior of voters makes a lot more sense. Like, and so I think that's kind of like the major myth I would challenge. I mean, and I think the example I use, which is to me very striking, is that one of the districts where Trump had the greatest swing was in AOC's district in New York, but she herself did very well. Like, she got, like, you know, 68 or 69%, you know, basically more than held her own compared to last time. But, like, Trump increased, like, by, like, you know, like 30 or 40% what he had in 2020. And so there's a lot of some interesting interviews with these voters, because there is a substantial number of people in her district who are Trump AOC voters. And what these voters will tell people is that, you know, like, well, I like AOC because she's standing up to the man. She's standing up to the system. And that's actually also true of Trump. You know, like, so I think that the fact that Trump was, I think the Democrats, by a bunch of their own actions, allowed Trump to occupy that space. They kind of ceded the space of social critique and of anger at the established order. And it's partially like with Biden's own way of governing. Like, he wanted to be bipartisan. He wanted to be, I'm going to restore the comity and the, you know, the friendliness that used to exist in Washington. But I mean, and you know, and then when Harris was running, she had, like, you know, well, we have all these Republicans, like, you know, Dick Cheney, that support us. And if that's your message, then you're basically saying that there is, like, you know, all the old politicians who've been around forever, like, you know, like, are in one party and Donald Trump's in the other party. And that's also Donald Trump's message. He's saying, like, I'm the guy that's going to stand up to the Democrats and the Republicans. And so he's able to get, like, people who also vote for AOC. So I think that, like, you know, this basic dynamic of Trump being allowed to consolidate anti-system anger is the biggest factor in the election. And I think a lot of people in the Democratic Party, like, leadership class, they can't see that because they themselves are so invested in the system that, like, you know, like, they don't understand how it looks like to people who are outside of it.
Mm-hmm. What are you planning to write about next?
Well, I mean, obviously the inauguration, I'm going to watch it. I noticed that, speaking of invading Canada, like, it's going to be -6 in Washington, D.C., so Trump's having it indoors. And I got to say, like, buddy, if that's your attitude, then you're not going to be able to invade Canada, because we don't get -6 there. You know, we're like Chicago. We get -20. Dude.
He didn't say he would go there, Jeet. He didn't say that, you know, he was going to spend any time there.
Yeah. I just don't think, like, you know, I just don't think that someone who can't handle -6 temperature is up for the task of invading Canada and Greenland. Like, how's he gonna? What's he gonna do if there's a military parade in these countries? You know, like, I'm gonna be covering the inauguration.
Yeah. I think that's going to be. I think it's going to be a very chaotic And I just remember last time Trump was in office, it was like you could barely digest today's outrage before tomorrow's outrage just blew today's outrage out of the water. So I think that I think that people are going to have to pace themselves. I tell my audience, find the cause.
I've noticed that people don't have that same urge to retweet every crazy thing he says. And I think that people kind of realize, I think that was always his strategy. I'll say 10 crazy things and people will be occupied by that, and then my buddies will get their tax cuts. So I think that I'm hoping for a kind of smarter resistance when people actually keep their eyes on the ball and are focused on what Trump is actually doing rather than just what he's saying.
Well, I hope that you will join us again in the near future. I enjoy your reporting. I enjoy your podcast, and it was lovely to talk to you.
Oh, it was a really great conversation. Yeah, I'm up for it anytime.
Great. Jeet here is the national affairs correspondent and columnist for The Nation magazine, also the host of its weekly podcast, The Time of Monsters with Jeet here. We are going to take a break for news and be back with much more with our good friend Ed Yanka after this.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Quite frankly, I get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
It is my pleasure to welcome back to our airwaves one of my favoritist, and yes, that's a word, my favoritist people to talk to, Ed Yanka of the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois. How are you, Ed?
I am. I'll tell you what, Joan, I was doing well anyway, but, I hope everybody lives long enough to have you welcome them into your show, because that is, if you ever want to feel good about yourself, that's a heck of a way to start.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of people who have very, very, very warm feelings for you. And, at the beginning of the year, I told the audience that they had to think of the word or the phrase that was going to be their touchstone for 2025. And the word that I have come up with for me is abide, to persevere, to last, to overcome. At the ACLU, knowing what we already know about Donald Trump, I would imagine that there are a lot of people trying to figure out how to prepare, what their touchstone is going to be, what is going to be the idea, the word, the phrase that gets them through the near future. When Donald Trump got reelected, and personally what the ACLU had to do the last time around, did you despair? I don't know any gentle way to say that, because I kind of did.
No, well, let me say this: I did not. That was not universal. There were many of my colleagues who did, and for good reason. In many ways, because of the work that they do and the people they interact with and the people that they know are going to be harmed by the cruelty of the incoming administration. But for me, I think it was a time of, okay, let's go do this. And, I think of it as, and I think that the if you wanted to think about a word or an idea or a concept that really permeates through the organization at this point, it's resilience. It is about focusing on the fact that we know that there will be harm. Our role is to reduce that harm. And so we have to be determined. We have to be creative. We have to be prepared. We have to use the tools that we built up, especially in this state over the last several years, and withstand the onslaught that will come, and be ready to protect as many people as we possibly can. It will be hard. It will be, anguishing, or, it will create anguish, and it will be problematic in lots of different ways. But, Joan, I think I've said this to you before. I'll just say when I bring it back to your question about the personal part is, I am old enough to remember sitting in a classroom the morning after Ronald Reagan, in a college classroom, the morning after Ronald Reagan was elected president of the United States, and it felt like the world had been upended. And I remember when the Supreme Court ruled in Bush v. Gore, and it felt like the world had been upended. And I remember November of 2016, and it felt like the world had been upended. This is going to be hard and difficult, but we have withstood this kind of thing in the past of administrations that were hostile to civil rights and civil liberties. And it's time to just get up, get dressed, and do it again.
I am really happy to hear you say that. I think that that's exactly what we want to hear and what we expect will happen with the ACLU. Let's start with one of Trump's big promises, these mass deportations. Day one, like it's the first thing he's going to swear on the Bible. He's going to walk to the microphone, and it's going to start to happen. I have learned that when Donald Trump says he is going to do something, you can't say to yourself, oh, that's so horrible. Nobody would ever really do that. He's being hyperbolic. Right. Because he says exactly what he means and exactly what he intends to do. Now, the more practical people have said he wants to do so much so fast. There isn't the money. There isn't the person power to pull it off. There may be some things that he puts into place, but it will not be mass deportations because that would cost too much money and they would have to hire too many thousands more people. What do you think?
I think so. Let me say, I think in this area, I think your instinct is right about much of this, but let's remember that this is the administration that literally ripped children out of the arms of their parents. In immigration
and that is on
settings.
The table again, according to Thomas Homan.
Exactly.
He said to the 60 Minutes reporter, she said, would you do that again? And he said, I would do whatever it takes. So, yes, I would do it again.
And so, yes. And so you're yes. Can it be done at the scale that they have talked about? There's even a question, if you want to get down to the brass tacks, not only do they not have the personnel, so, by the way, they would probably deploy people from other things like ATF or DEA that keep our community safe in other ways and put them on immigration enforcement just because, and claim they're doing something for public safety just to show that the lack of kind of real understanding about all of this. But if you even to the point that they probably don't have enough airplanes and flights to deport people at the numbers that they want to do. So I think that you're right that there's no way to do that. But we can, I think, anticipate across the country, and I suspect here in Illinois and in Chicago, we can, I think, expect to see a show of force, a kind of a cruelty about all of this that will come fast and furious. And I think that one of the things this is a place where, think about, again, harm reduction. So we know the city council has debated the welcoming city ordinance this week. We know we have the Trust Act in Illinois. Police officers in this state and local officers cannot cooperate with ICE officials in immigration enforcement. There are requirements for the ICE in terms of having a warrant before entering someone's home, in terms of the way they can behave and the way that they can act, in terms of stopping people in trying to do like traffic stops or foot stops or things like that. We need to be vigilant about communicating, what's happening on the ground, watching what's happening on the ground, not getting caught up in rumors or misinformation, but focusing on that to be able to challenge where we see things that are wrong and to hold local and state officials accountable for following the laws and the protections that we have here in the state of Illinois. It again, I think we're going to see a mass effort, but whether or not that effort actually crosses the line and is abundantly cruel is going to depend in a lot of ways, how all of us react at the local level and what we insist that our elected officials do.
I remember during the last Trump administration, there was a spontaneous demonstration that erupted at O'Hare. Jan Schakowsky was even there, where two girls came into the country who were coming in legally with a guardian, and the border folks held them. Even though the kids were legal and the guardian arrangement was approved and they had the paperwork, they held the kids because I believe they thought one or more of the parents did not have documentation. And the idea was that when the parents came to get the girls, they could take, I can't remember if it was one of them or both of them, into custody. And it turned into a huge demonstration. They wouldn't even let Jan Schakowsky in to talk to anybody. And after many, many hours and a lot of news coverage, the person in charge backed off and they let the girls go. Is that the kind of thing that you're talking about that you think we might be seeing, as opposed to, hey, we're going to take 2,000 acres in central Illinois and build an internment camp?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Joan. I think there's two things that we should be mindful of. Number one is exactly that kind of enforcement that you talked about with those two young girls. And I remember the congresswoman going there and literally just standing, on guard to protect against, those two young people being taken into custody, who were actually U.S. citizens, as I recall. Mm-hmm. And so, I think that is certainly one area that I think we would be concerned about. I think the second thing is that, where we see efforts to do, strict enforcement or a higher level of enforcement in communities across Chicago or the Chicago area, I think one of the things that is going to be incumbent upon all of us is to figure out, ways to donate, whether it's money, time, energy, support to the immigrants' rights groups, who are, and local organizations that are then going to be, supplying resources and help to families that are going to be separated by those actions to children or to, spouses and others who suddenly are left without their loved ones. And so I think that's the second thing. The third thing, I think, and I guess this is just to be very specific, is, we know what state law requires under the Trust Act. I worry about a downstate sheriff who suddenly decides that, Tom Homan and the administration tell me that I should be helping them enforce immigration. I'm going to do that, and I'm not going to ignore. I'm going to ignore Illinois law. I think that's a place where both in terms of, knowing about those things, really advancing and sharing out that information wherever one sees it or whenever one, hears about those things. And then, whether it's our state attorney general, whether it's an advocacy organization like the ACLU or others, is looking for ways to go and force those local officials to comply with what our law is. Again, the feds still may do other things that we can't control, those are the things that we can, that will either reduce the harm by making them play by the rules, or alternately, will help the people, who are being harmed by the kind of enforcement that they're doing.
I'm speaking with Ed Yanka from the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois. We are going to continue our discussion. Ed, when we come back, I want to talk about the Laken-Riley Act.
Yeah.
We'll be right back with more after this.
There's no excuse to miss Joan Esposito.
It's number one on my stereo.
Live, local, and progressive. You can listen to her daily at WCPT820.com on your computer or phone. Choose Views with Richard Jew.
General Grant on the show yesterday, he thought that you would be an excellent candidate for mayor of Chicago.
Eric's a great guy, y'all. We've had that conversation before. I'm going to agree with him. However, there is a person that I am dutifully and lovingly married to. I'm going to stay married until I die, not because I decided to throw my hat in the ring to run for mayor of the city of Chicago. That's my very political answer and response.
Richard Jew, weekday mornings at 6.
This is a WCPT Veteran Minute. During the Civil War, 11% of the Confederate Army was made up of enslaved men forced to join. One of these men was Robert Smalls. Smalls was a deckhand on the Confederate supply ship known as the Planter. During his time, Smalls learned as much as he could about navigating the ship so he and others could escape. And on May 13th of 1862, while officers were sleeping, Smalls, along with 16 others, took the Planter out of the Charleston harbor, navigating through all 5 checkpoints while heading to open waters looking for the Union blockade. Smalls raised a white flag of surrender, letting Union soldiers board the ship, giving them guns, ammo, and documents about planned Confederate attacks. Being a wealth of information, Smalls was given the role of the Union Navy captain. Stories like Smalls are one of the many factors convincing President Lincoln to allow free African Americans to serve in the Union Army. This has been a WCPT Veteran Minute.
Because facts matter. You are listening to WCPT 820.
Hey, Capitol Fools are coming to Skokie, North Shore Center for the Performing Arts, which is real close to Old Orchard. They're going to be there for 3 shows, 2 on Saturday, February 1st, a matinee and an evening, and 1 show on Sunday, February 2nd, which is a matinee. The Capitol Fools, if you're not familiar with them, it's a group of people who are very talented at writing skits and songs. And they take the news of the day, the political news of the day, and they put together some very, very entertaining material. It's really fun and funny. And if you come to the evening performance on Saturday, I will be there in the lobby at the WCPT table, and I will be introducing the Capitol Fools at the later show Saturday, February 1st. So let me give away a couple of tickets if you're the second caller. 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. And by the way, the 10th Dems organization, they're putting together an outing for them all to go to the Sunday show. Yeah, if you belong to that organization, you can also go with them, and then they're all going to go out to dinner after the Sunday matinee. Remember, you have to be 18 years old to be a part of our contest. Live in the greater Chicagoland, Northwest Indiana area, southern Wisconsin area. Avoid where prohibited by law. Only 1 entry per person, 1 winner per household. You can only win or qualify to win once every 30 days. If you want all the rules, they're on our website, WCPT820.com. Click on the contest tab.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by Ed Yanka of the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois. And you may have heard about something called the Laken-Riley Act. It's gotten a lot of attention because it actually has had some Democratic support, but it would change things for immigrants in a way that can only be described as extreme. Ed, explain what's going on with the Laken-Riley Act.
Yeah, the Laken-Riley Act is, I think, an example of two sort of misguided principles. Number one, that somehow people who've come here from other countries pose a danger or a public safety risk to the country, and therefore need some sort of special targeting as the result of that. And then secondly, I think is the misguided view that we can, sort of detain our way or punish our way, out of public safety problems. So, but what the law would do is to mandate detention for any non-citizen who is arrested for a wide range of crimes.
Arrested, not convicted.
Arrested, not convicted, and it's a really important distinction. So, number one, remember that an arrest is only the judgment of one law enforcement officer. It does not reflect actual innocence or guilt of a crime. It is simply that someone is arrested for something. I mean, I think we all read every day in our papers, not just that people are arrested, but people are convicted when they're innocent on a regular basis. We have a plethora of those situations across the country and here in Illinois. But it would mandate that these people then be detained by the federal government during the pendency of the criminal charge. Now, the couple of things are, number one, as we've discussed, I guess a few things. Number one, as we've discussed, this is simply a charge. Number two, the language for what kinds of charges are so vague that while this is actually named for a victim of a violent crime, it could literally apply to a mother who admits to shoplifting diapers for their baby. And so the idea somehow that we are safer in terms of public safety, and it's better for us to detain that person, I think is just crazy. And then lastly, of course, we have to then pay for the housing and care and the facility for someone to be detained for all that time, which means that we have fewer resources to actually do the things that really make us safer publicly. And so, this is, again, one of these measures that are intended to look as though we're being tough on crime or tough on immigrants, and, we're going to do something about it. And it's really, just a bill that raises, serious questions about both its cost and effectiveness, as well as being really cruel to people who get caught up in this. And remember that an officer who is you say there is an anti-immigrant officer out there somewhere, now has this perverse incentive to just start arresting people and claiming that they did something because it triggers this automatic detention. Mm-hmm. So, I think there's lots of problems with this. As you say, it has sadly sort of enjoyed some Democratic support in both houses of the legislature, certainly in the House of Representatives when it passed through a couple of weeks ago. I am happy to say on the procedural vote that happened this morning in the Senate that neither one of Illinois' United States senators supported it moving forward. But I think it shows this kind of performative, destructive, and ineffective kind of legislation and approach to issues that we're likely to see from this Congress and this administration.
I was trying to figure out why there would be Democrats voting for this. And the only thing I can think of is that maybe somebody who's in a purple area, and obviously if you're in Congress, every 2 years you're running for re-election, which seems like a system that is not very efficient. But maybe they're afraid that, if they vote against it, somehow a Republican opponent will say, oh, you're soft on immigration. And that, of course, is, that's the big bugaboo. Can't be soft on immigration. Got to be tough. Got to be tough. I mean, can you come up with any other reason why you think Democrats might have voted for this?
No, I think that's exactly it. I mean, again, I think people have drawn whole host of a whole host of different lessons from the election. And I'm afraid that one of them, for some people, and I don't know why, but I think for some folks, what we're seeing is this idea that we should abandon policies that actually work in favor of policies that somehow sound better or are easy or are, somehow, are that sound tough in some ways or sound, again, the word I keep coming back to is performative. And that's an unfortunate thing, but I think that's what that's what we've kind of seen over the last, over these last few months, and certainly in this vote, where, again, this idea of not wanting to be on the wrong side of a soundbite, even though the policy itself is not really of any value.
I'm speaking with Ed Yanka from the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois. We are going to take a break and be back with more after this.
If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Amazon, or HeartlandSignal.com. Just search for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
And with me is Ed Yanka from the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois. Ed, I got an ACLU email about, what are you guys calling it? The ACLU, how did you, hang on, hold that thought, I lost it. The Inauguration Day Advocacy Guide. Oh, my goodness. I couldn't find the title. And I think this is so wonderful. I mean, obviously, the ACLU is a lot of lawyers. You guys know the law in and out. When somebody steps over the line, you'll probably be the first to make note of it. But for those of us who have a looser relationship with government and the law, what will the advocacy guide do for us?
It is really an opportunity, for people to do a couple of different things. Number one, to engage in their own community, to find the ways in which they can, play a role at the local level, to be on the lookout at the local level, to be, I'm searching for the word, but to be advocates for themselves at that level. And so I think, that's one thing that the guide sort of teaches or tells them to do. The second thing I thought was interesting in there was that our colleagues at National are sort of reminding people to take a look back at Project 2025, which, now we're talking about the reality of that and not just its, possibilities, right? But to refresh yourself so you know exactly what this playbook looks like, and you can do those things. Third, they give a little bit of a opportunity to help people in terms of being able to track legislation court cases, bills, other things that are happening in the legislature or in the courts that impact civil rights and civil liberties, and sort of give people tools to be able to do those things. And so it's really, again, I think, broadly speaking, just this opportunity to be part of an effort to protect, to reduce that harm I talked about, and then figure out ways to share that, whether it's with an elected official, with your family members, with neighbors and friends, with community groups, and with others. And so, I think it boils down to these simple things about informing oneself, about finding spaces locally to be a part of, and about then, being learning tools for kind of sharing out that information writ large.
Well, speaking of those tools, there's going to be a feature where the ACLU tracks bills, not just here in Illinois, but in all the states. And I think this is critically important now because Republicans in their red states, they float different bills, different ideas, different wording to see if they can get it passed, to see if they can make it stick, to see if they can withstand the legal challenges. And once they've done that, that's a blueprint for other states. You don't even have to reinvent the wheel. You take what this other state has done, what has stood the test of the courts, and you bring it to your state. I don't know if that's something that politicians always did. I mean, occasionally, I guess, but now it seems to be like it's a plan. Okay, Oklahoma, you see if you can do this, and, over here in Iowa, we'll see if we can do this, and let's just see who has success.
It's interesting. A couple of things about this. So first of all, for years and years and years, the National Conference of State Legislatures and the National Commission on Uniform Codes would write bills that could be replicated in states across the country. And, often they were on hyper-technical issues, and that is exactly what would happen. In recent memory, there have been a number of sort of think tanks, generally kind of, what one would probably define as right-wing or conservative think tanks, that have taken up this mantle of doing this work and putting together these exactly the kinds of proposals that you're talking about, where you could get and this is just to give an example for people. So there was one of these measures that was passed in a number of states, including Mississippi, about abortion rights. It was challenged under Roe. That case ended up being Dobbs versus Whole Women's Health. It gets up to the Supreme Court, and all it asks is for a 14-week ban, as opposed to, and doesn't ask for Roe to be overturned. And then, of course, the composition of the Supreme Court changes, and suddenly the ask is not just to uphold this state law, but to overturn Roe. So it's creating these opportunities, not just for legislation that can be passed in a multitude of states, but for legislation that can then be, go to the Supreme Court to create precedent with the current membership of the court, to create precedent that then locks these measures in across the country. It is why watching that is so important. I want to add one thing, though, to what you said, and I think that as you defined it, it is really important. But the government that we have the most access to is the most local. So I do want to make a pitch again that one of the things, if you want to feel like you're really contributing, it's really frustrating here to think about what the state legislature is going to do in Oklahoma, right, or going to do in Texas, or going to do in Montana. But, what happens at the local level, at your local school board, to make sure that books aren't banned, or the curricula isn't changed, or that transgender students are respected and affirmed, those are things you can also be on the lookout for, in addition to, the kind of project that National is undertaking in terms of tracking those things. That's harder. That means you have to look at local news sources. It might mean you have to go online and look at the agenda for a school board or a library board meeting. But boy, oh boy, if you and 3 of your friends show up to that meeting, that just makes an enormous amount of difference. And so I think as we think about protecting, right, as we think about reducing that harm, one of the things that we need to make sure is that we don't start to see any intrusion, any incursion, any testing in the same way that those statutes that we talked about at the state level have done. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen at the local level, and that's going to take all of us really being mindful and watchful of that. And so I think there's lots of areas. If you are in the sound of my voice and you are troubled by the agenda of this administration, there is an opportunity, there is a role for you to play in helping to ensure that we, number one, push back against that at the state and local level here in Illinois. And, the other thing, Joan, I think a lot about is I was just on a national call earlier today and thinking about my colleagues across the country. You know what? We know that these policies that we have here in Illinois that advance civil rights and civil liberties are good policies, and this makes this a better place to live, save for the occasional cold snap. And so, one of the things that I think is that we need to protect those to serve as a model for other states, ultimately, for the way that we, for the kinds of policies we can create all across the country.
Yeah, I have told my listeners, since I'm afraid what's coming at us soon will be a tsunami of hideousness in pretty much every area of life. So I've told my listeners, figure out what you're passionate about. Is it books and book banning? And give that your all. Like you just said, show up at those library board meetings. Show up at the school board meetings if they're talking about books. Figure out where your area of passion is. Is it abortion rights? Is it immigration? And concentrate on that area, because we all can't do everything, but we all can do something. And I think to not get overwhelmed, everybody's going to have to focus. Maybe the ACLU can have a big, wide perspective, but the rest of us human beings, to keep our head above water, I think we're going to have a real solid focus. And I'm kind of setting up our next segment. We're going to take another break, Ed, Yanka, and I. There's a woman who does just incredible work writing about abortion, Jessica Valenti. I'm on her email list. She just recently published an article about 4 states that are considering making it a homicide to have an abortion. In other words, you have an abortion, you could be charged with murder. I want to talk to Ed Yanka. This does not seem like something that should be legal in any way, shape, or form. But we're going to come back from a break and talk about this right after this.
Hey, Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
Ed Yanka from the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois is here. And I was just saying that I get Jessica Valenti's emails, and she has reported that legislation proposed in South Carolina, Oklahoma, North Dakota, and Indiana. Hello, Indiana. Mm-hmm. Would reclassify abortion as a homicide and would prosecute abortion patients for murder. Good grief. Good grief. This can't be legal, Ed?
Well, I think one of it would not be legal under any precedent that we've seen thus far. But I think if you think back to efforts to kind of other and limit abortion care and access to abortion care, that this has been the trend and the direction in which this movement has been working and going for some time, which is to try to create personhood for a fetus and then be able to criminally charge someone who accesses abortion care. And, back to the conversation we were having a little bit ago, I think what you're seeing here, Joan, is an effort to pass a law like this, maybe to pass it in a few states, and then get a challenge to that goes up to the Supreme Court in the hopes that, a majority of the justices on this particular Supreme Court will rule in favor of personhood. And then effectively you would have a national abortion ban without having the Congress or the political leaders ever have to take a vote on that.
What do you think the odds are for success here?
You know, I tend to think that right at the moment they're pretty low. I think passing these laws, finding ways. You know, one of the things is that these laws are often put in place in states that already have full-blown abortion bans. So I think you'd have to wrangle through so many questions about whether or not the law could apply to someone, say, who lived in that state but traveled to Illinois, et cetera. Like, I think there are hurdles to get over in terms of this approach. I think it's pretty clear with the narrow margin that we see right now in the House and even in the narrow margin in the U.S. Senate. I don't really see a national abortion ban itself coming. So, you know, that wouldn't be the first worry that I would have. I think there are lots of things around access to reproductive health care that we should be worried about in terms of, you know, agencies taking particular actions, maybe efforts to, you know, try to reverse the approval of mifepristone. I think all of those things are things that if I'm simply creating tiers of the things I'm concerned about, I might be concerned about those things before actual personhood.
I think that the people who voted for Donald Trump are going to be very disappointed. I can't tell you, Ed, how many interviews I saw with people telling reporters, well, I'm an immigrant, but Donald Trump won't deport me because I'm a good immigrant. And all this other stuff that's going on. At what point do Americans say enough and rise up? I mean, you know, yes, there's a right-wing sort of movement throughout the world. Yes, throughout the world, many incumbents lost their positions in recent elections. But still, even with that, so many countries, like in Europe, they look at us and they're like, what is going on? You've lost your collective minds. And that's what it feels like to me, too.
Yeah. You know, I think looking at this, I'll just say there are, you know, a couple of things that I see and you know, maybe it's, you know, maybe I'm right and maybe I'm wrong. But I think, number one, I think that people have somehow convinced themselves that when someone says they will do X, that the X will be the thing that they want, not the thing the person said, right? I think we see that with the president-elect a lot. People say, oh, he doesn't really mean that. Oh, he wouldn't really do X, when, of course, he will. And so I think that part of it has led this to, you know, it's sort of a, you've got this tableau that you can create your own, you know, sort of paint by numbers, your own sort of sense of what you want policies to be. But that's not the way it works. And I think that one of the things that, you know, I think that just the absolute truth is that at some point, you know, people, it's interesting because if you think back to 8 years ago, Donald Trump came into office. He was chaotic and he was harmful. People got tired of that. They changed the leadership in the Congress 2 years into that and then rejected him 4 years later, although that's still apparently news to him. And yet 4 years later, there seems to be amnesia about what that was like. And so I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to explain people who vote against their interests, but there's no question that, you know, we've seen that happen in these election cycles. And, you know, we aren't out of the woods yet, I think, in terms of people not fully understanding that when they vote for someone who says that they will do something, that they are essentially signing on to that policy.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. I think there's a real disconnect. Not in all, there are some diehard MAGAs that are okay with everything. But I think that there are a lot of people who are just, I'm a lifelong Republican. I always vote Republican, or all these other things that are not necessarily, I'm voting for Donald Trump because, you know what? Let's bring back cruelty. I really miss cruelty. I really miss that kind of bad behavior. Let's bring that back. I think you're right, and I think that's going to be we'll just see how it shakes out. One of the things that has been under attack lately is DEI. Of course, all these companies backing away from diversity, equity, and inclusion. McDonald's, who is of course based in our area, talking about how they're getting rid of DEI, though they're still going to be inclusive. One of the things that has been under attack is apparently McDonald's. If you go to a McDonald's, let's face it, a lot of the people who work at McDonald's are Hispanic and African Americans. I live in a very white community. My McDonald's doesn't have anybody who's not Hispanic working there. And McDonald's, acknowledging that reality, created a scholarship program for African Americans and Latinos. And that is now the subject of a lawsuit saying that it's discriminatory because white people aren't included. Are they right?
No, they're not right. Unfortunately, they may find a sympathetic ear in the current construction of the Supreme Court that, remember, thought that affirmative action in enrollment in secondary or in colleges and universities, discriminated because they sought to have inclusive classes. Never mind that, by the way, that we know that colleges and university students do better when they attend with people who are different. I mean, that's just a human condition.
And I loved in one of Michelle Obama's speeches, she pointed out that a lot of these hoity-toity universities that have legacy seats set aside, that's affirmative action. I'm sorry, you're not competing with everybody else. Your family's rich. You bought a building. You made a donation. There's a seat for you. That's not even, Stephen.
I mean, and so the problem is that under that ruling from the court, these kinds of scholarships are going to be attacked by conservative legal organizations, and they are going to, they are going to be the subject of litigation, I think, moving forward. And what you're seeing is, in a lot of instances, whether it's in McDonald's and the DEI sets, but we'll see what happens with this particular scholarship program. You're seeing a lot of people back away from these scholarship programs, which only further limit opportunities. And it's just about an opportunity to succeed. It's not a guarantee. Nobody's giving you a job the first thing that you're not qualified for. It's the silliest argument, in the whole world. But yet, this idea that you can just cast everything as being DEI and somehow that means incompetent or not qualified is doing real harm, I think, to all of these kinds of efforts across the country. And, part of it is, and this goes to another thing I think we should be concerned about, with this administration is going to the idea that they want a culture and an education system and other things that only teaches a history that is kind to white people. That somehow that teaching the real history of the way that this country treated Native Americans or African Americans or others is somehow, harmful to white people and therefore cannot be done. These are not things we should be doing as a country and as a society. And I think it's I think we're looking at, we're looking at the need for people to stand up and push back against that, as opposed to capitulate to it and end these programs and really, further set our society back. I mean,
one company that has stood up, you probably saw this, Costco, yes. Which is a wonderful company. Even if you work for them part-time, you get great benefits. And they've said no. If there was some shareholder proposal to get rid of DEI, and the board of Costco said, we do not want you, we do not recommend voting for this proposal because we think that we are a better company when we are a more inclusive company. And on that note, I have run us into the end of our program, Mr. Yonka. Thank you, as always, for spending part of your day with us.
Can I say one last thing?
Sure, go for it.
About a few weeks ago, I was on the phone. I was on a call with some people from Peoria who are challenging their local homelessness ordinance that got passed there. And one of the young women on the call said that all they really wanted to do, that if their homeless encampments were going to be torn down, that she said she didn't know much, but what she knew is she had a box and she had a place to store it to help people protect people's belongings. None of us are going to go and personally evict Donald Trump from the Oval Office, but in our own way, we've all got a box and we've all got some place to store it. We just need to find a thing that we can do to make things better.
I love that analogy, and I'm going to steal that analogy from Ed Yonka from the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois. Patty's back. She's doing her show tonight, and tomorrow Edwin has his usual wonderful guests. Somebody from ProPublica, Mother Jones, and Jill Wine-Banks is going to join him. I will see you Monday. Have a great weekend and good night.